is going to be exactly the same. We come up with some kind of name. Now, most likely it's going to be path. And then we pass in the module we would want to get. And in this case, of course, it is a path module. And then let's just start with a very useful property, a separator property that returns a platform specific separator. So if I go straight up with console log and then path sep, this is going to return my platform specific separator. So if I write node.js, there it is. And of course, I have /. Now, if you're using a different platform, for you, the value might be different. After that, let's take a look at the path.join. So the join method, which joins a sequence of path segments using that platform specific separator as the limiter. And second thing it does, it returns a normalized resulting path. And in order to show you an example, I'll create a new folder. So not a new file, but a new folder. I'll zoom in and I'll say content. And inside of this content folder, I'll create another one. And I'll simply call this generic subfolder. And in this subfolder, I'll say a test and text file. And inside of the text file, I mean, you can place something, you can omit it, doesn't really matter. I'll just say text and then txt. And once we save it back in the app.js, now I would want to use that path.join method. So I'll say const and then file path is equal to path.join. And then we need to pass in those values as strings. So for example, since I'm looking for the content folder, I'll simply say / and then content. Then I know that inside of the content folder, I have the subfolder. That's another folder. And then eventually there's going to be a test.txt. So we go with test and then .txt. We save the sucker. And then if we'll console log the file path, we should see the whole path. And there it is. Now, of course, it is normalized and we get it as a value. So we have content, subfolder, test, and txt. So if I start adding some type of /, meaning trailing slashes, then of course they will be removed. We still get the normalized path. And we can also get the base name. So for example, I create this file path, but I only would want the last portion of it. How can I access it? Well, the method name is base name. So we're going to go with const and base and path.base name. And we just pass in that file path. And now if we console log the base, we should see the text. Again, these are just some of it. If you want just a directory, of course, you can imagine that there is a method that returns that as well. But since I don't want to cover each and every method, that's why I will skip that one. And there it is. Now, of course, not only I see my normalized path, but I also see the test.txt, which is my base. And the last method that I would want to showcase is path.resolve. And why it's so cool? Because it returns an absolute path. And once in a while in our applications, we need to provide that absolute path. That's why, of course, we'll have to use that method. And when it comes to path.resolve, it accepts a sequence of paths or path segments and resolves it into an absolute path. So below the base, I'm going to go with const and then absolute. And that one is equal to path. And we're looking for .resolve. And here, remember, when we talked about the globals, one of the first globals I covered was __ their name. So this is going to point to this directory where the app.js is located. And once we're here, then of course we just need to provide rest of the values. In my case, that is content. Then I'm looking for subfolder. And then eventually I would want to get to the test.txt. I would want to get this absolute path. And then once I set up the value, of course, if I go with my console log and if I provide absolute, once I run node and app.js, you can probably guess that in the console, I'll have my absolute path to the test.txt. And if you're wondering why we would ever want that, well, remember, our application is going to run in different environments, right? So, of course, the path to some kind of resource is going to be different in my computer, in my local machine, than, for example, in Heroku.